it's a uh, it's actually it's called dissipation of energy. Energy disappears from the condition it was in. So the energy that was keeping it there just drifts out. And this is why in what technically in what's called a closed system, a system that has no new energy coming in, will always drift toward chaos and can never move toward order. Like if the planet Earth, if it did not have the sun pouring huge amounts of energy into it, all of the life that has developed on the planet could not be. The planet would just be the raw elements sitting there doing nothing. So Allah uses the energy, the light from the sun, to give messages to the inert material of the planet that gives it energy and tells it to organize through all of those stages I was talking about yesterday. But once you get to the molecular and biological level, even complex molecules do not develop. Really, if you didn't have new energy coming in, you would never leave the atomic level, the level of just different atoms or elements. That's what the planet would be. It would just be made up of the different elements that exist. It would never even go into molecular form. It takes energy to take atoms and put them into a molecule. And it takes energy to put molecules together into a biological form. And it takes energy to sustain the life of a biological form. So if you don't have new energy coming in, all ordered systems tend toward chaos. If we had no energy coming in at all to our planet all of a sudden, say for instance there was a total shell put around our planet suddenly, real quickly all the life on Earth would deteriorate back to just the original elements. And the same thing is true. Sometimes I call it social entropy. If you're not putting energy into a society or to an individual, that individual is going to drift towards chaos, and chaos are basically all the negative things. Allah, and we know Allah likes order because the whole universe from the very beginning, it starts in a system of chaos, just random, particles floating around doing nothing. That's total chaos. Every single step is towards more and more order. And Allah does it by giving energy through light. And so we have to do the same thing with individuals and with social groups. We have to keep putting energy in to move them in a positive direction. And that putting of energy in, part of it is saying the positive things that are true to the kids, and part of it is modeling the positive things to the kids, and part of it is rewarding the positive things the kids do, and teaching the children to reward those things in their own mind. And all of those things are technically inputs of energy. You are really giving them energy. Every one of those is actually done by an exchange of photons of electromagnetic radiation. Number 17, we've already discussed, use a variation of the personalized system of instruction. And so I'll be interested to see when you start developing the materials. And I was very happy to hear some of you suggested that most of the classes can be done on a variation of the personalized system of instruction, because that would be really excellent. Absolutely anything you can teach, but like I say, it does require written materials to use the system. Anything you teach under the personalized system of instruction will be learned faster and better than any other way that we know of teaching. Number 18 is a suggestion about having a number of classroom graphs to show success rates. We want to be careful that they're not used as competition between children, but as, see, it's very nice if you can have a visual indicator of your success. One of the things, for example, that they have found helpful in helping people to diet is if they keep a chart, like on the refrigerator or something, that shows their weight going down. Just knowing every once in a while when you weigh yourself that your weight went down, that's one thing. But seeing an actual graph, like here was your weight, and now it's going down like that, we generally find that very rewarding. And so if we can, however the teachers want to make these graphs, there's lots of different ways to make graphs, but the graphs should show as visually as possible the success that takes place. And the more visually the graph shows how success can take place, the more successful they'll be in influencing the children. I remember when I was in equivalent of Standard 6, there was a children's newspaper put out. I forget, something weekly. Anyway, Weekly Reader or something like that. Anyway, it doesn't really matter what the exact name of it was. One of the things that it was doing was encouraging reading. And they had in each school actually a contest on who read the most books. And then so the teacher put up a chart on how many books, and after you read a book, you had to write a book report on the book. So the teacher could know you actually read the book. And once that chart got started, I was a really excellent reader young. And I literally read several hundred books because I loved seeing my line move on that chart, And unfortunately, because back then, competitiveness among people was quite rewarded, and I did grow up very competitive. I liked my line being that long and the next line being that long. That was the longer I could get my line, the better. But every time a book was read, I think a star was put there, and it just got so hugely long. See, because to read a book on a sixth grade level, I could read one in 15 minutes. I was actually when I was in the second grade, the teachers noticed that I already knew everything that was taught in the second grade, but because of the way the school system was, I had to be in the second grade 2 years. We changed from a half-day school to a full-day school when at the end of the second grade, and it was felt that academically the children in the first 2 or 3 years had not learned enough, and so everybody, when they started full-year school, started in the year that they were already in. So I had to do 2 years in the second grade. And the teacher noticed that I already knew everything really well. So what the teacher let me do, we had a set of encyclopedia, not the complicated one, it's called World Book, a fairly well-known one, but it's written really, I'd say, on a high school level. Maybe high school or a little better. So they let me read. I actually, through that school year, read the whole set of encyclopedia, the World Book Encyclopedia, in the second grade. And actually, they had a standardized reading test in equivalent to Standard 4, Year 4, called fourth grade there. I tested in second year university reading when I was in Year 4. So I was a really good reader. So you can imagine how easy it was for me to read a couple hundred books. I just read books, lots of books that were the books they were suggesting reading, but they were suggesting reading for Year 6 students. Well, if you could read at university level, you could read a Year 6 book in 15 minutes. You just skim the thing and you know the whole book. But the graphs really can have a big impact, so they'll be a good idea.
Can you read it to us how your parents really cultivate and give it to you? What did you do?
Well, I mean, to be honest, my parents, neither of my parents had very much education at all. My parents both grew up on a farm, and they only went to year 6 in school, and then worked full-time on the farm.
How did you pick up that technique of reading books?
Well, my parents were intelligent, although not well educated, and particularly my mother really pushed hard, and both my parents did read a lot. This was before television also.
Yeah, that is true. I would say that is
That made a big difference, right? So reading the newspaper, reading books was a very big deal. So my parents, they read the newspaper. I started when I was somewhere between probably 2 and 3 years old, reading the comics in the newspaper. By the time I was 4 or 5, I could read the newspaper. And it just sort of, and I loved reading. I loved learning the things. I mean, to me, it was like a really huge pleasure to read and learn. And so somehow or other, in my consciousness, not that it was particularly put in there by plan, but sometimes you end up where you end up. Remember I said in the shaping process, you don't always plan the goal, but you end up at a goal. And my goal ended up being loving to read and loving to learn. And still, I mean, absolutely. I've already actually read things on the internet today for about an hour and a half before you came. So I go through a whole lot of different news sources across the world every morning so I can find out what's happening in the world.
But how do we keep, with every other thing? It's slowly losing it because my father encourages to read. I mean, he was quite intelligent, I suppose. My mother doesn't read English, but she will read the papers from back to front to back. And we all 7, 8 of us who were schooling that time, we were reading. School holidays, we read the maps, we read the everything, we read the dictionary. And until such a time, my elder children, they learn to read. They learn to love to read. My daughter, who is 20 now, she read Shakespeare at 12 because she saw my husband and me reading. But by my younger son, he doesn't love to read anymore because there are other things.
Does he like computer games?
Yes.
See, computer games are a disaster. I mean, TV was bad enough, right?
Yes.
And then added to TV was the huge attractiveness of computer games.
Yes.
And it's very hard for reading to compete with a computer game.
But he would love me to read to him. He just doesn't have the time, the patience to read.
See, one of the things that's really critical is many people have not learned to read very well. And if you haven't learned to read very well, reading is not nearly so rewarding to you. So this is why it's very critical and why I want us to teach. This is why I specifically want us to teach reading in the school, although reading isn't normally a specific part of the curriculum. It is just so hugely important. I mean, when you read really well and when you can read fast and with good comprehension, there is just so much out there. And so one of the things when I teach children reading, I see sometimes children notice that they can ask me all sorts of questions and I know the answer, particularly for little kids, I know almost the answers to almost everything they can ask. So they often say, well, how do you know all these answers? I say, oh, because really early I learned to read very well. And then I read lots and lots of things, and I read every day, and I study every day by reading. And if you can read well, you get to know everything in the whole world. And it's the only way you can learn everything, just about everything in the world, is to read well and read a lot. So you try and give them as much motivation as possible. And nowadays you have to also try and have to take away as much opportunity as possible to watch TV and play computer games.
the real fights.
I mean, did I tell you my plan for television for parents? I think I told you, didn't I? What I suggest?
National Geographic, you know.
Select few programs there.
Yeah. In the first place, you put as much information in children's minds as possible that watching a lot of TV is not good. Right? And one of them is to tell children, which is true, Shaitan comes and visits you through the TV and likes to influence you through the TV. And that keeps some children from wanting to watch it. And also, but since children like to watch some TV, because I don't think it's practical to just say no TV, because if you say no TV, children will sneak around and watch TV in other places. So you say, okay, you can have a certain amount of time watching TV, but because TV is not really the best for you, you have to earn the amount of time you will watch TV by doing so many hours of other good things like homework or reading Quran or helping in the house or whatever you set up, right? You have to do a certain amount of time of that to earn however much time you earn of TV time. But you don't earn the right to just watch anything on television. And with the parents, you go through a list of what's available and you make up a list of things you can watch, and the parent has to agree with the things you want to watch. Then when you have your time on television, you can choose anything you want to watch from the list that you have made up with your parents. And with little kids, they'll go along with that well. I wouldn't want to try that with a teenager who hadn't started that way, but if you start that way with little kids, by the time they're teenagers, they'll still feel comfortable with it. And with computer games, to be honest, I'd really like to say no computer games. Most computer games are based on some sort of negative activity.
Even though they are like educational ones that
Well,
help them.
if you can purely come up, I mean, there aren't many really good. There are some computer games that are educational, but they're usually not the very popular ones because they're not, the graphics aren't as good and they're not as much fun. They should be making the educational games as much fun as they make the terrible games where you shoot people or this one Grand Theft Auto or something like that where you get points for driving around and running over people. You get maximum points for running over old ladies
But
in
now
wheelchairs or something.
the computer games now are interactive. You go through internet. You don't have to buy the CD, so you can just go in.
Well, yeah, but this is another thing where most parents are not as computer literate as their children. If you know how, you can keep the children from getting access to anything you want on the internet. But you have to know quite a bit to be able to do that. And there is some software that claims it will do it, but it doesn't do it, I don't think, that well or that easily. But the other alternative is to several. I mean, to be honest, I don't think children should have a computer hooked up to the internet in a place that is not public in the house. Like in their room. I don't think they should be on the internet in their room.
Somewhere outside.
Yeah. Not like in the family room or if you have a den or
But
whatever
they
you call
are
it.
left on their own most of the time when we go to work. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can shut off the internet. You know how you can shut off the internet?
Put the password, don't give the password.
I mean, really,
How you can say no to those teenagers who really fond of computer games?
no, you can't start with a teenager. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if somebody's already a teenager and doing it, what I'm suggesting isn't going to work with them. You have to use a different technique.
Like my brother's, when he has even 50 ringgit, he will use that 15 minutes of computer game.
I'm sure.
Yes.
There are actually a few cases now have happened. People have become so addicted to computer games, they have stayed on so long, they have died. They won't go eat.
It's a real sickness.
No, they won't do anything, right? They will just literally live on the computer game.
Because I make my son go out at least at 4, at 5 to go and play a game outside, physical. There's not a single friend outside, and it's school holidays. See, all of them are hooked on the computer, and he doesn't have a friend to go out and play. So
I mean,
it's difficult. I mean,
see, television made a huge change in family and social life, and then computers, internet, and computer games together have made another huge change in social and family life. And really destructive, really destructive. I mean, if I started with young kids, I would get them to a real minimum of TV and only, really the best thing to do is, I know it's very time consuming, but maybe they should sell it or make it available cheaply, to record good programs, good children's cartoons and programs, and let them watch from the VCDs rather than from the television itself. That's really the best to do, but it's a lot of work.
like now, in the case of my son, he's 12. He likes physical actions outside. You know, he enjoys. But now it's school holidays, and he's bored. I left him alone at home. There's not a single friend who wants to play. So he said, you might as well watch TV. He goes outside, walks around in the garden, and there's not a single friend to play football with or play badminton.
I know. See, it's a
So
real
we are
disaster.
losing.
What has happened?
We are losing.
Yeah, that's what I'm just saying, right? The first television and then computer, internet, and games together have really destroyed virtually the human way of life, you know, and they've made us into people that just sit in front of computers all the time, or either sit in front of a screen. Probably, there are a lot of people, I would say, spend half or more of their waking life sitting in front of a screen.
It's terrible, but
Well,
you don't know how to go, because I don't know, being a boy, I think he needs a friend to play with. And then he just go in and watch TV.
It's obviously not much fun going out alone to play.
Yeah,
I mean,
This is my experience. It's 11 years ago when I left Gaza. There are only 4 to 5 TV channels. But then today, we have 12 TV channels in Indonesia. So I realized this. The society is really changed. The way they live, the social condition and so on. So really changed because of television.
like in Malaysia, if you have Astro, I think you get about 40 or 50 channels.
Yes.
But in places like in Southern California, they get about 500 channels available. You know, so all day long you have something that might be attractive to watch, and people get sucked into a life of just watching television. I mean, I don't know whether they have them in Malaysia. These programs where they sell products. Do they have them in Malaysia?
yes. Normally midnight.
Well, they have people who
And yes.
their whole life is to sit there and watch for things they like to buy, immediately pick up the phone and buy them, and that becomes their life. I mean, you know, and look, Allah created us really to be active all day long. You know, I mean, basically, for most of human history, and probably until the Industrial Revolution, everybody was active all day long. You had to be active all day long, really, to survive. And that's what Allah made us for. So Allah gave us bodies and minds all prepared to be active the whole waking day. And basically to, sleep between dark and sunlight and do fairly hard activity in the rest of the time. And now we've changed that, and our society is a disaster for it. I mean, these things, we want to get into the minds of the children that these things need to be changed, right? We want to say to the children specifically, these things are wrong, these things are harmful. This is not the way Allah wanted things to be. And we want them to grow up planning to be among the people who change them. Because really, these things have to change or we're not going to have a good Islamic society. I mean, you cannot have a good Islamic society no matter how good the programs are on TV, when people are spending up to half of their waking hours watching TV and that. Allah just did not make us for that. So eventually that has to be phased out. I mean, I make more radical suggestions than that in Volume 2. I suggest that all the world cities be dismantled, right? And we get back to a size village where, I don't give an exact number, but I say is small enough so that everybody in the town knows everybody, but big enough so you don't see everybody every day, which I would guess would be no more than a couple of thousand or so. And really, that would, there is a very different set of social requirements in a small community like that than there is in a city. And a city takes away many important social obligations to each other. And it may not be possible to maintain a truly right way of life in a big city. I mean, it may be big cities were something that Allah never planned for us to have. See, we have to realize that nothing, almost nothing that exists in the world had to be that way. Things just happen to be that way for various influences in the world, but many of those influences were to make it easy to make money for people and gather great material wealth. I mean, so much of the world has been designed so that some people can gain great material wealth. They weren't designed to make society right or more happy or to they were really designed so a few people could get more wealth. So we have to eventually have a reevaluation of almost everything in society, because society has not been planned. And what we should do eventually, when we have a fully and right Islamic society, say, okay, what would be likely be a right society in each instance of what society will have that would most follow the will of Allah and allow the will of Allah to be expressed. That's what we eventually we should do. So I mean, we have to look long term in this also. So right now, really what we are doing is like we are trying to initiate a transition period. I mean, somebody has to come along and say, what's going on is not right, and here's a better way, and show that that way works better. And then if we can show what we're doing in the school works better, then people may listen to some other things that will work better. And there's always Allah's way that will work the best. And the next one is called the self-control game. I haven't told you about the self-control game, have I?
No, you don't.
The self-control game, I actually developed this self-control game in my experimental school a long time ago. In that each classroom would have one or two kids. Actually, always they ended up being boys, but occasionally there is a girl, but usually it's a boy who has a really poor attention span, can't sit in their seat without either fiddling around or getting up or something or other, right? And so what I wanted, and when you say to them, you know, why can't you just, you know, sit there? I don't know, I just can't help it, I just have to do this, right? So I made up a self-control game. Kids really love to play it. I mean, it's unbelievably simple. Basically, you have all the children in the class. They find themselves a way to sit, you know, where they're not fiddling with anything. Their hands are just on their desk or something. They're sitting, and once they reach a comfortable point, the only thing that they can do is blink their eyes, if you're, you know, because you can't stop eye blinks. Other than that, if you want to move, you can't move. You can't wiggle your foot. You can't, you know, wiggle your fingers. You can't look to see anybody. And if you have an itch, you can't even scratch it, right? You can't sneeze and you can't cough. All you can do is breathe and do your natural eye blinks. And you challenge the children to see how long the whole class can do it without anyone, because as soon as somebody makes a move, the whole class loses. And then you time it with a stopwatch or a watch. And then you on the board, you write up where the children can see, so they don't have to turn their head. You write how much time, or else you can say how much time has passed. And like, you saw me do it, did you, with the preschool children also at Adney? So preschool kids, about 3 years old, right? Of course, in the beginning, their amount of time was like 1 second. You know, I mean, they just can't do it, right? But really, within one session, I think we got up to something like 30 seconds in one session, where they could all do that. With the older children, we got up to 15 minutes, which is really hard. I mean, you know, for anybody, it's quite difficult to do 15 minutes, to get a whole class to do 15 minutes. And also, you'll notice, if one person, like say for instance, the classes got up to like 3 or 4 minutes, and it took them like 10 tries to get up to 3 or 4 minutes, and then somebody does anything, sneeze or make a move, and then they're picked out as the one who ruined the time for the class, the whole class is, oh, you know, like a lot of heavy peer pressure to maintain your self-control. The whole goal of this is, first to get them to exercise self-control, then after they have done it, you talk to them about the fact what it took to do it. You say, that was really hard, wasn't it? I say, yeah, really hard. I said, when you first tried, you can't do it, can you? And they said, no, we can't do it. But you can learn to do it, can't you? And they say, yes, because, see, they're just answering the questions as to what actually happened. So they have observed this. And I say, how do you think you are able to do it? And what we come up with is that they decide with their mind to control themselves. And I say, this is called self-control. That you have shown that you can have total control over yourself for up to 15 minutes. And no matter what you would like to do and what your body would like to do, you can say with your mind, I'm not going to do those things, I'm going to totally control them. And so you have proven that you have total control over yourself. And then I say, so if anything that you ever feel like doing, like interrupting in class or you know, annoying somebody or whatever you feel like doing, you've already proven that you have control. So you can't ever again say to me, can you, that I don't know or I couldn't help it. Of course you can help it, can't you, because you know you have control. And that's what the self-control game is about. And you'll be surprised how much the kids love to play it. I mean, when I used to do weekly talks to the kids, after I started the self-control game, every single time I went into class, the first thing they said, can we play the self-control game? And after they've got up to a certain period of time, I don't know whether you can get children at 1, 2, and 3 to 15 minutes. it might be hard to get them to 15 minutes. Maybe 5 and 10 minutes, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. But once you get them there, you don't want to play the game all the time, right? Because now you want to make it a special thing. And you just bring it out every once in a while when the children are maybe, when you see some behavioral drift has started in the class, and they have learned after the self-control game, self-control is a lot better for a while because everybody knows they have it and they practiced it. But it will drift away from that. And so after you see it start to drift away, you say, okay, let's practice the self-control game again so we can all remember how good our self-control is and how we do it. And also, I always say to the children, because I like to put Allah in everything, I say, do you know why you can do it? They say, because Allah gave you this really special brain. Animals, they can't decide what they want to do. But Allah gave you a brain. It's the only brain in the whole world that gets to decide what to do. So when you take control of yourself, and you're using this really special thing in your brain that Allah gave you. I said, it's a wonderful thing to have, that you can decide always what you want to do. Animals have to do whatever they are made to do. But human beings, we get to decide everything we want to do. And then also, you can go from that into the concept of responsibility. Right? If you don't have self-control, you don't have responsibility. But if you have self-control, you have responsibility. Yeah. So I can say to them, like, say for instance, you feel like when the teacher's talking maybe, or when everyone's working on a project in the class, everyone's working quietly, and you feel like you want to talk to somebody, you can say to yourself, oh, I have self-control. Allah gave me the ability to decide. So I don't, just because I feel like talking to someone, that doesn't mean I have to talk to them. I can use my brain the way Allah gave it to me, and I can say, no, I feel like talking to someone right now, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to use my brain, my special brain Allah gave me to say I won't do it. And you'll find out that you can get a lot of positive effect from this self-control game. But it was truly amazing to see a group of 3-year-old kids who I mean, you can barely, in the first place, it's a little hard for them to even understand the game. But somehow or other, they do seem to understand it relatively quickly. They catch on, maybe just by seeing what everybody's doing. I don't think they understand quite the concept verbally. But how quickly they can go from, like, less than 1 second's worth of self-control to 30 seconds or more, or maybe even 1 minute. I don't remember what we got up to. But to see the children, usually nobody ever teaches anyone to use self-control. And so this is why I say everything can be taught. And so in this way we teach self-control. And you know, these others are just suggestions, they're not for sure. But along with that self-control game, I was thinking we might want to have a poster in each class saying, I have control over my actions. So we can always have the children remember, right? And so one of the things I think is important is for the teacher not always to have to be in the position of telling the child actually with words what they have done wrong. But if you can just point to something in the class that you know, like if there's a sign up on the board, what's it say, I have control over my actions. So if somebody is not controlling their actions, you can just point at that sign and they get to know that when you're pointing at that sign, it's saying you're not controlling your actions, and you should be. And then it pulls them back, and it doesn't have to deal with an actual interaction with the teacher, with the child, to say, no, that is not okay. We need the children to learn very well to discriminate what is good and what is bad, right? And so I have definitely found one of the best ways of doing this is, and I suggest here, have a poster in class: who likes what I am doing, Allah or Shaitan? But anyway, whenever I have picked out children for doing something wrong in class, I always ask them, who do you think likes what you are doing? Like if I'm talking and the child is talking, I say, excuse me, but I'm talking and you're talking at the same time. And I say, who do you think likes you to talk while I'm talking? Does Allah like you to do that? And they always say no. I say, Shaitan like you to do that? They say yes. I say, so you want to work for Allah or you want to work for Shaitan? They say, I want to work for Allah. So you probably shouldn't talk when I'm talking, should you? I say, no. So in the future you will try not to talk while I'm talking? They say yes. I say, oh, that's really nice. So you can do this in lots and lots of situations. When anything goes wrong, you say, who do you think likes it?
Should we still have the Shaitan word because it sounds like it looks, because when there's writing, it looks spooky.
Spooky.
No, the fact that we are writing the Shaitan part.
Well, I don't know what to call it.
Or maybe we just write something like, I do this, would Allah like it?
No, we really need that distinction there, right? I mean, it's a very important distinction. That there is not just things Allah likes and other things, right? There is the things Allah likes and the things that Shaitan likes. I mean, it's hard to get that concept across, that our purpose here in this world is to really defeat Shaitan's attempt to keep us from doing what Allah wants. See, because that's what Shaitan's role is, right? To keep us from doing what Allah wants. So, it's just that the word Shaitan to me does not, I grew up with the word Satan instead of Shaitan. And I don't want to say Iblis. That's not really appropriate. But I think the Shaitan really is technically more correct in Islam than just using the term Shaitan.
I think Allah also always mentioned very direct Shaitan is our enemy.
Yeah.
That's why we have to obey our children also.
So, I mean, we don't want to scare them with it when they're little, but also we want them to get a very early realization that these two powers exist and are influencing us. And we want to always accept Allah's influence and always refuse Shaitan's influence.
But if the kids just go around telling other kids, you're acting like a Shaitan, some parents, they don't like it.
Well, then we probably should suggest to the kids they don't say that. See, because we don't want them to say mean things to each other. So we don't want to say that they are acting like Shaitans, but their behavior might be what Shaitan likes.
What Shaitan likes.
Yeah. See, this is the same thing as we don't say to them, you are bad, but the behavior you're doing is bad. So they get to connect the behavior with wrong, not themselves with wrong.
That in process, who like is not Shaitan. When you say the Shaitan, when you think that you do, who likes you? Allah likes you.
And no, but we don't say that, right? We say, who likes your behavior? Yeah, right. See, who likes what I am doing, Allah or Shaitan? Not who likes me. Right? I mean, no matter what you're doing, Allah likes you. But Allah does not like if you do certain things. So we want to be sure the focus is on the dislike of the behavior, not the dislike of the person.
If we say something like, let's see, who's clapping hand right now? When you do this,
That gets a little complicated because of
That opinion is giving the what?
No, but it gets complicated in that there's, somebody could say that's implying Allah has hands.
Sometimes your friend looking hand or shaitan is giving hands. When you see that thing, which was the
I don't want to say this is the only way to say it, but I have made it quite a good way to say it. If we can come up with a better way, that's okay. But we have to. But I did put a lot of care into the wording on this. I mean, in English, I would like to say, please, and I did at one point actually say on the third responsibility about making the world good, say pleasing to the eye of Allah. Now in English, that's really comfortable and appropriate to say, but it implies Allah has an eye, which I don't want to I mean, I can't say Allah does not have an eye, but I certainly don't want to get seen for saying Allah does have an eye. Allah is whatever He is, but I don't know, and I don't want to imply that I know He has an eye or a hand or anything else. Some certain parts of Islam do want to say that.
Sometimes children ask that why does Shaitan like us to do bad things? Why do we like it?
Yeah, but the answer is, right? Allah has allowed Shaitan a role. And what Allah has allowed Shaitan to do is try and get people to do what he doesn't want and not do what he does want. I mean, that's basically the whole purpose of Shaitan, to defeat Allah's plan. See, it isn't just Shaitan likes bad things. Shaitan likes bad things because they defeat Allah's plan, because Allah's plan is for goodness to always win over evil. Shaitan's plan is for evil to always win over good. And so that's the answer to why Shaitan likes you to do bad things, because Allah doesn't like them. Allah wants you to do the things Allah doesn't like. So He'll try and find ways to get you to do it.